Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the July 11th, 2017 meeting of the Jackson City Council to order. And in place of Councilman Charles Rom, who is absent, who was designated to give our invocation and pledge, obviously is not here, and the mayor will pinch hit. Please rise. Father, we humbly come before your throne this morning just to tell you that we love you. Thank you for loving us as imperfect as we are. Father, we're here to proclaim you as our Lord, our God, and our King, and to acknowledge your divine sovereignty in our lives. Father, we thank you for this city that we call Jackson, Tennessee. Thank you, Lord, for the many ways that you've blessed this city over the years. So grateful for that. Father, we thank you for members of this council who have been ordained. Your word says that they have been ordained by you to serve your people. Father, we thank you for them. We ask that you would give them wisdom and strength and discernment as they handle those matters which have come before them today, Father. So we thank you again for this time together. And we just pray that everything we say, everything we do will only bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Need on the roll call, if you can show Councilman Rom absent. He is out of town. He called yesterday to let us know that. And Councilman Cisco is probably violating the law. He's running late, probably speeding, so we'll kind of stall and wait for the councilman to get here. Council, let's go ahead and approve the item 4, approval of the minutes of the June 6, 2017 meeting and the June 20th, 2017 meeting. And if there are no additions or any corrections to those, with no objection, we'll consider those minutes approved. To everyone in the audience, item 5 is the invitation for public comment, and any item under new business is open for discussion. So if you have anything to say as far as addressing the council, if you'll please let me know, I'll be happy to call on you. Raise your hand, stand up, or whatever, and I'll acknowledge you, and you can come up and address the council. If you'd be kind enough, when you come up, is to give your name and your address, if you would do that for us. We have no proclamations this morning, no recognitions, and a couple of changes in the agenda. Again, if there's no objection from council, we can move item 2 under first readings up first. I know we have several people here who would like to go ahead and address the council and then get on with their duties for the rest of the day. So we'll handle item 2 first under first readings, and then also under new business, if we can take that first item and move it up just before the consideration of the ordinance, the budget ordinance for 2017-18. That'd be proper protocol, I think, for us to handle that first. So with that being said, first readings, consideration of the ordinance to rezone property located along the 50 block of Orwell Road from AOFH Agricultural Open Land Flood Hazard District to RG2 FH General Residential Flood Hazard District containing 5.14 acres, more or less, submitted by Terry Drumright of TLM on behalf of Gail Guston and the Dream Center. Ben?
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning. Good morning.
You have the materials pertinent to this rezoning request. It was presented to the Planning Commission at their last meeting, and they are recommending it to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have concerning the rezoning.
Okay, any questions from council as to this particular item on the agenda, the rezoning?
Dan, could you just briefly, I guess, go through the rationale as to why the Planning Commission is going to recommend this?
Yes, sir.
In light of all of the publicity that it's gotten, as well as many of the folks that are here today.
Okay. As I said, this use was this.
Anyone else having a problem with the volume? Thank you. Maybe just this side. Now I get it. Okay. Okay, IT guys, if y'all would crank it up a little bit, this is a rock concert, no reason why we can't do that. Okay, and if we would, the council, if you'd speak up and stand, you may have to sit on top of your mic. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm usually don't have a problem getting loud, so. This item was presented to the Planning Commission, and again, the way the Planning Commission reviews things is they look at the request, they look at its relationship to what the comprehensive land use plan shows, and they make their decisions based on planning principles, whether it makes good planning sense, whether the zoning is appropriate given the zoning classes that are around it. And so that was the rationale the Planning Commission used for reviewing this one. As you see on the map here, the area shows you the location of where they're asking for it. All that's being asked to be zoned at this time is the area where the Dream Center would be located. They are asking for an RG2 use. The reason why they're asking for the RG2 use is because the special exception use, which is another step, is in the RG2 zone. So with Aspel Manor and similar facilities and institutions, the RG2 is the class that is normally used for those. And then the special exception use, which requires Board of Zoning Appeals approval, is the class underneath that is assisted living. They consider this to be an assisted living facility because not only do they provide housing, but they provide other services to the individuals that are with the Dream Center. So that is the reason for the zoning that they're asking for, and that's the reason why the Planning Commission considered this zoning class. But again, the zoning was only placed on the area where the Dream Center is. The driveway that would serve the property is not required to be zoned because the driveway doesn't require that. It is adjacent to an RG2 zone, if you can see on the map. This is the existing RG2 zone, and it is a logical extension of that zone. Also, in looking at this zoning, they also looked at the land use plan. And under the land use plan, this area was shown as institutional uses, appropriate for institutional uses, and the Dream Center would fall into that category. So given that it was in compliance with the land use plan and given that it was adjacent to a zoning class that they were asking for, the Planning Commission recommended approval of it to you.
So it's only, would change the zoning only of where the Dream Center would be?
That's correct.
So the slippery slope of a mass of multifamily housing coming into that area is unfounded?
No, sir, because again, the land use plan does not show the property as appropriate for multifamily. It shows it appropriate for institutional, and that's what their use is. The process they'll go through is a process that you would go for that type of use for an institutional type use. Any multifamily that would be permitted in the area would have to be in compliance with the land use plan, and you can see that there are no multifamily in the area.
Mm-hmm. Can you address the flooding issue?
The flooding, I'd be happy to address it, but I'd rather the city engineer come forward at this time, Scott Chandler, and address the flooding, since he's an engineer and I'm a planner,
Okay.
even though I play an engineer sometimes.
You're going to stay in your lane.
That's right.
Basically, we talked to some representatives of the Dream Center and asked, they had questions as well about the flooding area. And basically, you have two designated areas that are regulated by FEMA. It's the FEMA floodway and the FEMA flood fringe or flood zone that they call it. And we basically discussed that will there be any detrimental impacts for filling areas in the flood fringe. And by definition, the FEMA allows fill in the flood fringe. They don't allow any fill or really cut in the floodway without a lot of hoops to jump through, because filling in the flood fringe doesn't, it's allowed because it doesn't affect the floodway elevation in a 100-year flood, but filling in the floodway actually would. And so our office, there's a regulatory process. We govern that here for FEMA and make sure that whatever fill that they do they'll have to certify an elevation of their building, and, you know, we get a plat, Stan's office gets that done by a surveyor as part of the review process and check off during the construction of the
So
building.
you would work with the developer?
Yes, yeah, and we'll make sure that, you know, that they don't do anything in the floodway. We have had in the past some, you know, some back and forth with FEMA when there were some digging in the floodway, and it was actually near this area that had occurred. And, you know, one of the things FEMA looks at if you do anything in the floodway is that, you know, they want to make sure that's not modified in any way to impact the flood elevation. And so we want to be mindful of that as well.
And just to give a council a reference, if you look at the map on your screen, the floodway is the bluish colored area that you see, and it's an area, it varies from about 200 and so feet wide here to, it gets wider to, 300 to 400 feet wide as you get closer to where the Dream Center is located. And as you can see, none of the rezoning request is in the floodway because there's no development potential in the floodway. Also, you can see that there's quite a wide floodway between the Dream Center facility and Belle Trace, which is on this side of the creek and this side of the floodplain. So there's, quite a bit of natural buffer that already exists in the area. And so I just wanted you to see that is the flood, the 100-year flood, the flood fringe that Scott talked about is this more turquoise kind of color that you see adjacent to it.
Scott, could you go a little further and talk about the regulatory process of building in a flood fringe?
Well, basically, I mean, you can go as far as submitting to FEMA and getting a letter of map revision where you submit your documents to FEMA, show them your grading of your property, and if you elevate your land out of an elevation that they have determined would be the flood fringe area, then they'll actually redraw their line around your property to take you out of the flood zone. And that's just part of their, that's part of their system, that land that would otherwise be undevelopable because it's in the fringe is now allowable. They drew these lines in order to designate what is really the no man's land of development versus an area that you can develop, but they identify that it's an area that will flood in the 100-year flood, and so to protect any developer that comes in, they have those regulations that allow them to be elevated, the property itself, or they do require, and we have to regulate that for them, that if you build a building or a structure in that zone, you have to have a certain certified elevation that would guarantee that it wouldn't flood in a 100-year flood. So it's really to protect the development in that area. But it does allow it instead of deeming the property undevelopable.
And that's why they designate the two differing zones. Is the floodway would be an area that they would not want any development in because they have proven that would be an area that could be impacted by development. So they basically prohibit that unless you prove to them through a very extensive analysis, engineering analysis, that you would not have an impact. But they did allow the flood fringe to be developable, but they make sure that any structures there are protected by being 1 foot above the flood elevation. So that's how the process works.
Can you talk about the pervious surface on the stormwater runoff requirements?
Yeah, well, of course, y'all are probably aware now, just about any development that happens in Jackson, there's discussion about the amount of pavement that's put in, rooftop drainage, things that, areas that will not seep into the ground. It's just a lot more runoff now after a site is developed. And so, you would have the same detention requirements where you have to control your flow rates off your property for post-development to pre-development rates. And that's something that we, every day, day in and day out, look at plans and make sure that as properties develop, that's what we're doing.
So meaning that if the property's developed, they have to develop it in a way that no more water runs off than what already runs off as it
That's
is
right.
pre-development.
Yeah. We have, we control the 2, 5, and 10-year storm rates as part of Jackson's regulations. And like I said, we review those plans day in and day out, if, for sites that are already zoned and just are ready to come in with a development plan.
Scott, what is your answer to the residents who feel that because of this development, it is going to cause their properties to reduce in value as well as be subject to flooding?
Well, like I said, the flooding issue itself, the FEMA program allowed the Beltrace subdivision to be developed with the same regulation. They would have, they were elevated out of the flood fringe. Now,
So
they're
that
off.
development is in the floodplain themselves?
It was.
was.
Now it does, certain properties along Beltrace is in, the floodway backs up to them.
Right.
And their detention pond actually is set in the floodway. But not the flood fringe itself was, most of those properties were elevated out of the flood fringe as part of their development. They use these same regulations in order to develop Beltrace subdivision. And so you don't have a flood fringe there because those properties were elevated.
So the same
But
thing that we're asking the Dream Center to do.
Right, but the floodway would stay, those boundaries would be the same. And the field, it's not, I made the analogy about basically a bathtub area. I mean, you've got the floodway as a flow channel that filling in the fringes is not supposed to impact the floodway elevation at all, and that's why they allow that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, to simplify what you're saying, I guess, is that the concern on some of the Beltrace members were that if they built here, that would push more water onto their property.
Right.
And you're saying that when they develop, the engineering will not allow them to do that.
That's right. What FEMA says is that filling in the flood fringe will not take capacity away from the floodway. And so you're allowed to fill that without any impact to the main flood
Okay,
channel
because
elevation.
they've got to contain all their water on their property, so there's not extra water running off before than there was after.
That's right.
And Stan, to simplify the discussion of the institutional rezoning as opposed to just basic multifamily, could you simplify that?
Well, multifamily would be, your traditional apartment complexes and or higher density complexes like you see Cherry Point, Cherry Grove, some of the apartments that are around Jackson, but around Jackson Walk. But what they're asking for is, with a use, you have two things that dictate a use, and that's the land use plan and the zoning. And basically what they've done here is through the land use plan and the rezoning process, they've established a zone that will allow their use, but the land use plan dictates what that use is, and it basically is dictating as institutional, which is what they fall into. So the RG2 accommodates them, but not as permitted outright. They still have to go through Board of Zoning Appeals. And the Board of Zoning Appeals is a special exception use, so whatever the Board of Zoning Appeals approves, in other words, when the Dream Center submits their plans to the Board of Zoning Appeals, it'll only be approved for what they submit. It's not approved for anything else, so it's even more restricted than a normal zoning class.
And so with the land use plan there's no land use plan beyond that RG2 that's already existent to make it possible for a multifamily
No, sir.
or institution to come in there?
No, sir. Nor is there zoning that would allow that.
And this is not going to open the door up for more.
No, sir, because again, no property that surrounds the Dream Center is shown as appropriate for multifamily on the land use plan.
Stan, I understand that now, and thank you for explaining the difference. Of course, this is not my district, but I have received a lot of phone calls, as I know we all have, and I wish Mr. Cisco were here because he could speak for those constituents, but all but one of the phone calls, the people were against it. I think the main thing is they see this as multifamily, because technically, I don't know how many beds there are, is it 60 that they hope to have? 60 different people, different families, they see it like that. And they see their neighborhood as being single residences. So, and then the other thing is they're worried about the congestion, so you might talk about that a little bit. Trey.
Well, again, in looking, when the Dream Center was looking at this location, one of the things that they, and also when Northside Assembly was looking at trying to help the Dream Center, they looked at a location that would isolate the Dream Center so that it wouldn't impact or have any impact on adjacent land uses. And so they picked an area that, one, is not, it's not adjacent to Belle Trace. It's across the floodplain and on the other side of the creek from Belle Trace. So it's not right adjacent to Belle Trace. Now, some people may consider, since it's in the area, it has an impact, but it is not adjacent to in terms of land use. And so that was one of the reasons why this location was selected. Also, from a traffic generation standpoint, you know, the traffic generation of a facility of this type is not like retail or commercial where you have peak flows at certain times. It's more of a staggered approach. And given the background traffic that already exists in the area, this is going to be minimal in compared to additional cars that would be generated. So there's not really a traffic concern there. If it was a generation that we felt like would be beyond what could be supported, we would require a traffic study, but it was not seen as necessary.
And how far off the road is it again?
Well, you know, this map is like a 1 to 400 foot scale, so you're quite a distance. I can look at my file if you want to.
Just a ballpark.
But it's at the back of the property though, correct?
Yeah, it's at the very back.
Can the people on Belle Trace, would they be actually able to see this?
Terry, do you know the length of that driveway?
I do not.
Yeah, it's more than that. It's over 1,000 feet back, I would think. Yeah, because you know, if a lot is, you know, is 100, say if a lot is 80 to 90 feet wide, you can see there's at least 10 lots before when you get halfway back. So it's a good 1,000
And is
feet or
this a
better.
wooded area, lots of trees, or is it wide open? Of course, I know if it has trees, they'll have to take some down to build it, but.
Well, it's more of a grassy area because it's been a part of Northside's property and they've kind of maintained it. And I can put up an aerial shot if you'd like to see it.
Mrs. Bud, I'm Rick Allison. I've got some panoramic pictures of the site.
Rick, why don't you
Rick,
come
we'll-
forward? Why don't you come forward?
Okay.
That'd be good.
Shot down.
I was gonna save this, but since the issue's come up, we took some panoramic pictures of the site. And,
Can you go there and put it on the screen so that the audience can see it as well?
Remind the council, we're not in a public hearing yet. Y'all requested some special.
I'll sit down like this and
Will the parking be at the front of the building or the back of the building?
Ma'am,
Parking, will it be in the front of the building or the back of the building?
here's the map, the aerial shot that shows you kind of the driveway. And this map is like a 1 to 500 scale, so if you go, you know, you're over 1,000 feet back. The parking, according to the site plan, is situated in this area of the site.
Is that the back, I'm sorry?
It's
Side?
like the side, it'd be the east side. And I have a site plan that I can put up too.
That's all right. This is fine.
Here's your site. see that the area where the circle is, that's parking spaces there.
And that's spot zoning,
No, sir, it's an
not
extension.
spot zoning?
No, sir. It's an
Sure
extension.
look like it.
It's an extension of existing RG2 zone.
Stan, in this picture, they'll be developed where the field is.
Yes, sir.
Will all those trees stay, or?
Yes, sir. It's, the trees that you see are in the floodway, so they'll stay. You can see here, the field area, the grassy area is where the facility would be. The area that you see in this area where the trees are, that's floodway, so they would not be developing in that area.
And this is a one-story structure they're talking about building?
Yes, sir.
Okay, council, any other questions of Stan or Scott?
Mayor, I got a question regarding for the, police chief, if I may.
Sure, Julian, come up.
The four things I got comments on from the residents who were semi-opposed to this were flooding, traffic, and more apartments being built. And I think we've addressed those, that there shouldn't be more flooding, traffic should be not much extra traffic, and apartments wouldn't be allowed because of this. But the other question that hadn't been developed yet is crime from the, added crime to the area. Could you address
Well,
that for
since
calls we've had in the past for
2014,
Dream Center?
there's only been 6 calls for service at the current location. And one of those was simple assault and everything else was civil. So it's minimal calls for service
And that's over the last 3 years?
since July 2014.
Okay.
And Chief, that's at the current location, adjacent to Madison Oaks? as well?
Yes. I could probably find some residents in the area that's had more calls for service than Dream Center.
See, I've had more at my house. Okay, any other questions of Chief Weiser? Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, any other questions or comments from the council? In order to continue this, we'll need a motion and a second to where we can go right into the public hearing.
So moved.
Have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Okay,
Public hearing.
okay, we'll go into the public hearing, and we'll be happy to call on you, and you can ask the chief a question, okay? Chief, that's okay. Just gonna ask it later.
Okay.
Okay, we're going into public hearing, and I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here who would like to be heard on this matter, speaking in support of or in opposition to. And if you would, just hold your hand up, and I'll be happy to call on you regardless. It doesn't make any difference. It's support first, opposition second. It makes no difference as to order. First hand I see will come up. Okay, I think I saw a hand over here first. Come on up. If you'd be kind enough to just introduce yourself and give us your address for the record.
Most people already know me. Yeah.
Good morning.
I am Kim
Morning.
Cox at 8 Bell Trace, and I have a couple of things. First, I would like to ask the chief, does he have a count on how many wrecks have occurred at our entrance trying to even get in our place? Because I've worked in many of them myself.
Okay.
Well, my response to that is that type of information should have been requested prior to this meeting this morning. If you would have sent me an email, I've been happy to respond and got that information for you.
Okay. I know I've worked many, so. We are here in opposition to the zoning from RG2 to the following reasons. Congestion on Orwell Road. We have had numerous accidents on Orwell Road due to heavy traffic and the lack of a turning lane and the curve into our subdivision prior to the red light intersection on Old Humboldt and Orwell. Rezoning to multifamily dwellings will greatly increase the traffic that is currently not well-directed or maintained on Orwell Road. The property in question is currently zoned floodway. The site will have to be built up substantially and pulled out of the floodplain. Our subdivision has already experienced flooding in the past with several rain and storms. So with this, the increase of fill in sight will further impact our subdivision. I know we addressed that, but in my opinion, our opinion, you can't raise that and not push it over onto us, because that ditch floods all the time. Plus, rezoning that, we feel like would send precedent that if Calvary wanted to do the same, they could put private housing back there if it met their standards. Property values, as Beltrace homeowners, we are very concerned with our home values and the impact that rezoning will have on the current property values. We all take pride in our homes, low maintenance and shared easements to be enjoyed by all in the subdivision. I know I was going to go in the rezoning, but y'all have addressed that about it going to be special zoning. We hereby today ask you to consider carefully the impact of this rezone and to advise that we strongly oppose per rights our homeowners. We love our neighborhood and look forward to keeping it safe and properly maintained.
Okay, thank you.
But I do have some pictures of 2010 flooding, if anybody'd like to see them, where it was within feet of being in some people's houses.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else would like to be heard? I saw a hand back in the back. Come on up, and then I'll get you next, okay? Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Randy Carter, 27 Oilwell Road, also pastor at Northside Assembly. And I just kind of wanted to share how this dream happened in our heart, and I'll try to do it without crying. Nothing worse than a 300-pound old-age man crying in front of us.
It's okay. We got plenty of tissue.
About a year ago, as I would drive by the space next to our church that we've owned for about 17 years or so now, I felt like it began to mock me a little bit, like we're sitting here and all the dreams that you've had for this property have not come to fruition. So I really began to pray, and I'd drive back on that property and sit there and pray and seek the Lord. And not shortly after that, we found out that the Dream Center that we love and support and just highly value their ministry that they provide to the homeless ladies of our community and to the children, heard that they were being displaced because the current facility was being sold. And something began to stir in my heart as to how we could help. And I began to pray and not share it with anyone, and then I began to share it with a couple of men in the church and a couple of people that help keep me in line, because sometimes my dreams come from pizza, not from God. And so we began to share, and then eventually shared it with our board and then with our other leadership and with the church and with Gail at the Dream Center. We felt like, you know, there's a huge need in our city to help people. And that is the vision and the mission of our church, is to help people, not just to be a place where people meet on Sunday morning, but to be a practical help in people's lives. Sunday, I'm preaching through the book of James this summer, and Sunday we were in verse 22, to be doers of the word, not just hearers of the word. And that's always been our goal for the last 24 years that we've been here, is to do that. And so we thought, how can we help? Well, we looked around our bank account and realized we didn't have several $1 million to go buy a facility, but we did have some land that we could possibly donate to the Dream Center. So we contacted Gail, and we took her out there on the ride of her life, and she wanted the whole thing. She was ready to take over the church and everything else. So, and I said, no, wait a minute, you know. So, but we began to dream, and then we started reaching out and contacting the officials and just to see the viability of this. I love our neighbors in Beltrace. Some of our members live in Beltrace. Honestly, I think it's one of the prettiest little streets in the city. Years ago, I almost bought there and couldn't afford it at the time, so didn't. But we have tried to be extremely good neighbors to them, and hope to continue to try to be good neighbors to them. And so in the decision to give the land that we are giving, we tried to make as minimal impact on Beltrace as possible. I think you've addressed, Stan and the engineers have addressed the floodway and the floodplain, and there was a question, I think, I'm not hearing very well, I'm old and I don't hear well to begin with, but I have ear infection now and really can't hear, but I think there was a question, will this be visible to Beltrace? So I drove up there last night, drove through the weeds, and with the foliage in the floodway, especially this time of year, most, 8 or 9 months out of the year, there will be hardly any visibility. You would have to look really, really hard from Beltrace or from the Dream Center to see each other. Now, from the road, you will see it from Oil Well, but it's going to be, as Stan has said, well over 1,000 feet off of Oil Well. We think we understand the concerns, and I've tried to put myself in their position, and I've asked myself, if this was in my backyard, what would I say? And I think all of us have to ask ourselves that. It's legitimate questions. And I can only say what I would hope I would do, because I haven't been in that position. And I would hope that I would reach out and help the poor and the indigent among us. So from the church, we voted to give this property. We voted actually to give another piece, but when we began to research it and study, we came back and took it to another vote and said we need to give this to where it would have the least impact. And that's why we moved it to the northwest corner. The building would be probably, I don't know the exact numbers, Stan would have a better estimate probably, but you're talking from the nearest home 400 to 500 feet to the building. And again, you have the floodway on both sides of the creek. We call it a ditch, but on both sides of the creek. As far as the traffic, I was not aware that there had been a lot of accidents there. We haven't, that we know of, in the 13 years that the church has sat on the corner, have not had any accidents. We've had some in the parking lots due to some bad, someone ran into the front end of my car one time. But I don't think that's going to be a major impact. We're for this. We love our neighbors, want to be good neighbors, but we also love the ladies and want to serve and help them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pastor.
Reverend Carter, may I ask you a question, please?
Yes, sir.
What are your future plans for that existing other land? that you
I'm going to
have?
retire in about, no.
Y'all don't have any existing plans?
Oh, we do. Yes,
What are they?
well, we don't have specific plans. We have on our current, we are, help me get situated here. On this property right here, we have our existing building, that's 7 or so acres, 350 parking spots. We have a pad that's already been developed. And if people will remember, when we built that building years ago, we had to do a lot of dirt work. And then we added 100 parking spots after we built the building, and we did additional dirt work so the next phase would probably be an educational facility. Ultimately, we have the dream that as the church would grow, that all of this property would be developed. We, in our master plan, we had an auditorium that would seat 2,000, educational facilities and a gym that would accommodate 2,000 people, 1,000 parking spots, and a ball field. We're not, giving this property, we would not be able to have the ball field. and maybe a few less parking spots. I don't know when that would happen. We'll be debt-free a year from now. I don't know that I'll be the pastor.
You
when
have
that-
any plans for assisted living development over there?
No, we had looked at that in the past and had chosen, not real seriously, but we had looked at that, and we'd had people approach us over the years. We've had, the whole time we've owned the property, we've had people approach us every few months, it seems like, or at least every year, I'll say that, wanting to buy part of the land. If you have land in North Jackson, people are going to want it, and they're going to want to build on it. And we've told everyone no. And when we looked at the assisted living facility, it wasn't a good fit for what our heart was and the vision of the church, so we did not have it at that point. And there are restrictions in the deed that our lawyer has drawn up. There are restrictions that would limit the use of this land to what it's being proposed for. And I know that when we get upset, exaggerations can happen, and I certainly appreciate the neighbors that have contacted me. I really do, and welcome that dialogue, but I know they've been concerned that there'd be mobile homes there.
Right now, is what they're concerned. They're concerned about their livelihood.
Right. You know, one thing, the church owned the property before the subdivision was built. And
Either side can, what you call romance it to their advantage. That's what the whole deal is.
well,
So, I mean, you can romance it for your side, and they can romance it to their side. I don't call it extreme.
I'm too old for romance. I forgot what that, I think I remember what it was, but we just want to love people, and we want to fulfill our mission to be doers of the word and hearers of the word. And we're about loving God and loving people. That's what our mission has always been and always will be.
Oh, I don't doubt that
Fulfill
one
the
bit.
great commandment and the great commission. And this is a great way to do that. I understand concerns, and my heart, you know, if I was owned there, I can certainly understand, and I'm thankful that everyone's here and welcome their input. But I think it's a good thing. I think it'll have minimal impact.
Thank you, Pastor, very much. Let's see, I think we had one right here, yeah. Yeah, here and then I think over here in this first row.
Mr. Mayor.
Morning.
City Council.
Morning.
Kind of hate to go after Pastor Carter. He's a tough act to follow, but what I would like to say is, first of all, my name is Rick Soroki. I live at 45 Bell Trace Cove, and I just wanted to share a few things this morning about some concerns we have with this proposed city ordinance for rezoning. First of all, I'd like to draw your attention to something in your packet. It's a memorandum from the from the planning staff recommending the Dream Center rezoning on the 50 block of Oil Well Road. And something that drew my attention to that document, I believe it's in your packet that you should have with you for this morning's meeting. But in the last paragraph, it says, quote, "The planning staff recommends approval of the rezoning request since it represents a logical extension of the existing RG2 FH general residential flood hazard district, and it is in compliance with the comprehensive master land use plan," end quote. We saw on this overhead picture right here that within that area, the only thing that we have are single-family residences, subdivision dwellings. So that statement in there, that recommendation made to the city council is somewhat disingenuous in that respect, because it does not address the reality of what we have existing in that area today. If you were to drive in that area, that's all you would find is well-manicured subdivisions, single-family dwellings. I'd like to make 4 points in opposition to this ordinance. My first point is the intended use of this property, if rezoning is approved by the city council, is to develop a large group shelter complex that has the capacity to house over 100 people with special needs and circumstances in one large facility. This proposed development is adjacent to several established single-family residential subdivisions which have derived property value from being exclusive to single-family development. These developments have earned a reputation of being very desirable single-family residential properties due in part to their location, individual subdivision operating covenants, and proactive homeowners associations working to preserve that value. Several realtors who actively market residential property in these subdivisions believe this proposed development will have a significant negative effect on single-family property values in the adjacent subdivisions, causing harm to the current homeowners as well as Madison County and the city of Jackson when property values decline, reducing their property tax revenue stream. Point number 2. The property under consideration for rezoning is currently zoned AOFH, which designates this land to be in a flood hazard area. Virtually the entire approximate 5.14 acres under consideration borders on or is in close proximity to Moyes Creek, with the majority of this parcel located within the designated flood hazard. In the spring of 2010, the West Tennessee area sustained a substantial amount of rainfall in a short enough period of time to cause significant local flooding. As a result of this event, the Moyes Creek overflowed its banks, and the resulting floodwater encroached to within feet of several residences in the Beltray subdivision. I believe that if the property under consideration were developed at the time of this event, the additional water runoff from this adjacent property to the north of Beltrace would have added to the flood condition, with floodwater reaching the dwellings, causing floodwater damage. City council members need to consider the increased flood risk to tax-paying property owners by voting against this proposed rezoning ordinance and protecting existing property owners from unnecessary additional property damage risk. Point number 3. In reviewing the location map for the proposed development on this property, it appears that access to the group shelter is exclusively from Oil Well Road, and the single access entrance would have limited visibility to eastbound drivers on Oil Well Road due to the slight curve of that road to the north. Oil Well Road at that location is a 4-lane, heavily traveled main east-west thoroughfare for city residents. Given the size of the proposed facility, service vehicle traffic such as employee, food, maintenance, cleaning, waste removal, etc., would present a constant daily in and out traffic flow at this site. This significant surge in the traffic needed to service that facility increases the accident risk to area motorists and pedestrians. The final point I have regarding this public welfare concerns is the sustainability of that facility and what may happen to the development in an uncertain future. In the event that there is a default of the intended operating plan due to funding issues or other unforeseen circumstances, I would be extremely concerned of what a facility of that size in the midst of residential neighborhoods could become. There are several examples of repurposed and abandoned buildings in the city, some with good outcomes, but many with poor results. As a property owner adjacent to that development on a rezoned property, I would have no input or influence in any disposition decisions regarding the use or non-use of that building. This circumstance quite possibly could lead to further property value degradation of the surrounding single-family homes in developed subdivisions. These are some of the issues that point to public welfare harm and increased risk to property owners in proximity to the rezoning ordinance proposal. I am asking all the members of the City Council this morning to vote against this ordinance to protect tax-paying City of Jackson property owners from the harm passing this ordinance would cause. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your no vote on this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Shrokey. Any, let's see, I think we had one right here.
He's been standing up.
Come on, Betty.
Mr. Mayor,
Morning,
members
sir.
of the city council, I'm Billy Spain. I live at 33 Bell Trace Cove. I've heard a lot of talk today about flooding. Flooding is there. I don't understand floodways. I don't understand how to read these little maps, topographical maps, but I do know flooding when I see it. Our neighbor a few years ago, we had a torrential downpour one afternoon for about an hour. As she opened her back door, she found water approximately 3 inches from her door coming in. At the same time, I was desperately trying to get home to see if my wife was okay and to see if the furniture was going to get wet or what have you. The entire area had become flooded. It looked like Reelfoot Lake there. 3 subdivisions had water. As I was attempted to get to my house, I'd go out of one and into another, and the city was blocking off streets at that time. So there is concern. The big problem with all of this water is there is a 30 to 40-foot ditch that parallels this particular property. That ditch carries a tremendous amount of water, and when it gets to the bridge that goes over it on Orwell Road, it can't take all the water coming at it, so it flows over and flows out into the adjoining area. That ditch is a big problem I see for the Dream Center. It's in vegetation. In fact, children do play in it, and it is horrendous to think about these children getting out and playing in that ditch. You may think they don't do it, but several years ago, children on Saturday afternoon were playing and found a lady's body there in the ditch. So those conditions do exist out there, and I would just recommend that you not approve this particular area for a Dream Center. Perhaps you're not the body for me to say this to, but I thought a simple solution to this to be the YMCA property on Campbell Street would take care of the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Betty. I think right here on this side, yeah, come on up. I think you were next, and I'll get you next.
Mayor and City Council, glad to meet with you guys.
Good morning.
I'm Eddie Jenkins from 17 Ashton Cove, representing the Cottonwood neighborhood. We're the neighborhood on the east side of Bell Trace. A lot of it, I'm going to try to be brief because a lot of it, their concerns are ours too, but I want to speak for our neighborhood also. And we're very concerned about some of the same items. The parking is one of our concerns. It seems like I really can't tell exactly where this is right there. But the number one thing too, I'd like to know a little bit more about this parking. And there's just going to be one entrance in and out of the planned facility?
Yes.
Man, yes.
Okay, and another thing, on the Dream Center, we are big fans of the Dream Center. A lot of us donate to that. It's a wonderful charity. But we are very concerned about the location of it. And we want you to think about us, our homeowners. Many of them are retired and planned on that being their place to go, to have the last home for many. But just consider us in that. And I have a petition here that some of the homeowners that were concerned with the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you very much. I can take that petition right here and get it before
And
council if you
I
like.
have one other member from the subdivision, Miss Kathy Briggs, that'd like to speak to you too.
Briggs, you want to come up? Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Good to see you. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kathy Briggs. I live on 36 Ashton Cove. And I, along with the other Cottonwood members, oppose this. Number one, because both of these communities are quiet neighborhoods. The Dream Center is a great thing. We do not oppose the Dream Center whatsoever. But it's our livelihood. It's like Mr. Eddie said, this is where we have invested our money into our homes, our peaceful community. There's wildlife, all kinds of wildlife over there in that area, and I'm just concerned about the parking area backing up to our, I don't think it'll be as quiet as it is now with the business there, and but I don't want anybody to think that it's not about the Dream Center. It's not. It's just about our quiet, peaceful neighborhoods that this is going to come right in between us. And there's also flooding issues on our side of that field. And I don't exactly back up to that fence, but all the neighbors do, and they have flooding issues over there. And this is just what our concern is. And thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Beck, come on up. Is there another hand for the next one up? Okay, right here. I think it's first. Morning, sir.
Morning, I'm Rick Allison, 14 Deepwood Drive, which is on the other side of the bypass. I actually used to live in Windhurst subdivision, which is across Orwell from this proposed development. I appreciate the opportunity to come here, and I'm honored to have been asked by the Dream Center to speak on their behalf. I wasn't nervous about speaking until people started calling me and texting me last night and encouraging me and telling me that they were praying for me and the outcome of this meeting. So I hope everything I say honors the Lord and honors the purpose of the Dream Center. I guess I represent a large mass of people who quietly support this effort. I think we have a lot of them here in the room, and I want to ask them to quietly stand up. And
Okay, thank you all.
I can assure you that these people represent the tip of the iceberg of support for the Dream Center. This is a privately funded organization. It's gospel-based. It's making a huge difference in this community. It's a ministry. I don't think it's accurately characterized as a shelter. It's a facility that's run by a couple of extremely dedicated and hardworking individuals, Ms. Gail Gustafson and Stephanie LaFoon, and a small support staff. We've been given this opportunity here next to Northside Assembly through the graciousness of that congregation led by Randy Carter. And we started this planning process several months ago. And one of our primary concerns when we planned this was to have a low impact on our surroundings. And so we've met with engineers throughout the process. We have the services of TLM, which everybody knows is this area's premier architectural and engineering firm. Mr. Terry Drumwright, an engineer, and Ginger French is leading the architectural team that's designed a beautiful building for us. We budgeted for over $100 a square foot. We're talking about a $3 to $3.5 million facility. Those kind of facilities don't slip into dereliction, and this charity is not going to slip into that either. This community has come forward with unbelievable support. Our finances are in good shape. We plan to build this building without debt, or we won't build it. Our plan is narrowly tailored. It does not open the door for a flood of development. There won't be any more development other than what we propose to build. I want to address the flood concerns because those concerns are ours too.
Let's call Mr. Drumright up and join.
Yes, sir, please.
David, would you come up and join for any flooding questions, if you would?
Okay.
Thank you.
We share the same interest with regard to flooding as do the residents of Beltrace. This building is going to represent a significant community investment, and the contracting services and the engineering and architecture services are specifically addressing that concern. So one of the questions that we asked is that will we be at risk for flood? Are we taking an unnecessary risk for our facility to be flooded? And also the key operative question for people in the area is a simple one, and that is, will the construction of this facility increase the flood risk for neighbors in the surrounding area? And the unanimous answer that we've gotten from both TLM and the city of Jackson is no. I'm not an engineer. I don't know that anybody in this room is. Maybe the opposition has a different engineering opinion, but the prevailing engineering wisdom in this room has indicated that the construction of this facility won't increase the flood risk. Am I correct in saying that, Terry?
Yeah, let me address that and maybe one or two other small things. Yeah, let me get up here where it heard. By definition, the way a floodway is established is to assume that the flood fringe is filled and does not exist. So by designating the floodway, FEMA has determined that it is completely acceptable to fill the flood fringe without impacting the elevation of the 100-year flood as established by the floodway. FEMA calculates to 2 decimal places, which is not realistic, but they do. So that I'm really clear, it's physically impossible for filling the flood fringe to raise the flood elevation established in the floodway. So filling the property outside of the floodway therefore cannot affect the flood elevation. And I'd answer any questions about that. I'm just mentioning with regard to parking that this facility has 25 parking spaces. And that's by regulation. The Dream Center tells me they don't need near that many. So this is not a facility, and maybe Mr. Allison can address it further, where you have significant traffic moving in and out at any given time.
Yeah, Mr. Drumright's correct in that. This facility operates with a come-and-go staff of about 3 people. Most of the residents don't have their own vehicles. They use a church van. A lot of the residents, of course, are children, and they will be riding the bus to school. In my conversation with one of the neighbors in the area that lives in Windhurst, the corner of Windhurst subdivision, directly across the street from the proposed site, Senator Ed Jackson was really looking forward to seeing the difference that the Dream Center could make with a facility like this. I was looking forward to hearing those children playing out there, knowing that they have a safe, nurturing place to be. I also want to point out that the Dream Center is occupying a couple of single-family homes right now. And I don't think, I'm a neighbor to one of those homes, my office is, and neither of those homes would ever be suspected of anything other than just a family living in there. They're quiet, they're respectful, there's no loud issue, there's not a lot of traffic. The concern about traffic, I can understand, but, I think it's important that Terry pointed out, that the city has agreed with us after we've explained how the ministry functions, that that small number of parking spaces is all we need, because there's minimal vehicle traffic.
Okay, any questions of council for Mr. Allison, Mr. Drumright? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Okay, right, I think right here on the front. I think you had your, come on up.
Good morning,
Morning.
Mayor, Council.
Good morning.
David Marbury. I live at 56 Bell Trace. And there's a couple of things I want to say right off the front is that I think I can speak for most of my neighbors that we have no qualms with the Dream Center. It is a fine organization. They do a good work, and we are not against the Dream Center. The other thing is Pastor Carter and I are good friends. We have drank coffee several times on occasion. And if you said I'd be opposed to something he was for a year ago, I'd say you were crazy. But we were Christian brothers before, we're Christian brothers today, and we'll be Christian brothers tomorrow. Looking on your map, I've got 2 or 3 questions. Finally, I was glad that somebody called it a ditch. The flowway and the creek and all that, it's a ditch. And there are trees along our back of Bell Trace property, and for those that have never been there, I would encourage you to go down and look. We've got a walking trail around 2 ponds back there with security lights, benches, fountains. It is just a great place to live. My concern is the flooding part also, and I'm not going to go over everything everybody else says. I'm going to ask some questions. If you raise that building in the back, I was taught at an early late age that water flows downhill and to the least resistance. Is that right? Is water going to flow off that building down to the ditch? If so, I think the ditch running behind our subdivision also has water running from the south part, probably under oil well, and that ditch does fill up. And during the last flood, I know it was within 3 feet of one house. I know that it was within 12, 15 feet up my backyard to my house and several others. So I'm not worried. I understand raising the building, but is the flow going to go off the building down to the ditch, which is our problem? Also, I had a question of why was Wheatfield not the entrance to that place? Wheatfield runs off Old Humboldt Road unless there's property issues or something. Anybody answer that?
Well, I don't think the council really knows. Yes, Rick, could you mind?
The reason we didn't use that street is part of our low-impact planning that we've been working on for a few months. We didn't want to connect to any residential street. We didn't want to interfere with any residential areas. And also add, I wanted to address this point, the trees that are in that image there won't be disturbed. None of them will. Our building is all to the east and north of those. And I know that street that runs around the back, that's a proposed street that runs around the back of the building, serves the back of the building. That's just a proposed drawing, but we don't have any intention of disturbing any of the wooded area between the site and your subdivision.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you, Mr. Marbury. Thank you.
Okay, now the next question is, if you're gonna run the road from Orwell up to the Dream Center, is that road gonna be elevated and more water run into the ditch?
The road bed is already there. It's out of the flood fringe, or it's out of the floodway. It's present. All we'll be doing is hard surfacing it. So we won't be changing any of the topography with regard to the road.
Well, that brings up a point. Back in the storm of 2020, that road was flooded and half the area up to the church parking lot, that field was flooded. If it floods again, how are you gonna get emergency vehicles up there?
I think everybody in this room knows that 2010 was classified as a 1,000-year flood and it caused problems for a lot of areas of.
Okay. Stay in order, please.
Okay, one other comment, and this is for the city council. I think, if I'm not wrong, there's been talk last few months about sewage and drainage problems here in the city and possibility of maybe even a tax increase to address those. Randy, I think, Wallace, I think you kind of headed that up, or at least you've been quoted more than anybody else. And I have trouble seeing a council that would have a problem here and even think to add something that would increase that problem at this time. So I urge you to vote no.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marbury. Right here, and I'll get you next, okay?
Just want to make a quick
Scott?
comment that the current zoning with the church on there and their current plans for the future will be filling in the same floodway without this decision today. Very likely they could move forward with a next phase of the church and wouldn't require any vote whatsoever. We would review that in-house and they would be allowed to fill in that same floodway.
Okay,
Flood
thank you.
fringe.
Thank you,
Flood fringe.
Scott. Okay, thank you. Please. Morning.
Good morning to all of you. I am Cynthia Deaton. I live at 57 Beltrace Cove. I've lived there for 11 years. And I know some of you and have seen some of you. And I just want to come up and talk for just a moment. Please know that I've lived my life not being a protester. I'm at work when everybody else is protesting. But this issue, I had to come. I have always had faith that our elected officials would make fair and good decisions for our city. Therefore, I've never protested anything. I'm a newbie to this. But this issue today affects my front doorstep and my pocketbook, literally. I have worked very hard in my 57 years to have what I have. I have always been law-abiding. I've paid lots of taxes, especially in North Jackson. I've always held a job, and I've voted regularly, having spent all but 2 years of my 57 in this town. The decision made today affects my finances and my single largest investment, which is my home. First, though, let me make something very clear. Everyone in this room, including me, wants the Dream Center to find a forever home soon. I mean, we all agree on that. We may be Democrats, we may be Republicans, but we all agree on that. The Dream Center has lots of support here today and in the community. But this issue is not Beltrace versus the Dream Center, okay? Rezoning this piece of land owned by Northside Assembly of God Church for any general residential, multifamily, however y'all want to describe it, any purpose is detrimental to our neighborhood's continued well-being. No person or organization simply gives away land in Jackson unless it's of no value to them. That alone shows that the land in this flood hazard area is not useful to the church for any purpose of theirs. As a neighborhood of 24 good families, and we've got almost every family represented here, along with the other subdivisions, some of them are on the other side. As a neighborhood of 24 good families, we are opposed to any site work required to build any type of facility due to the water problems that we already have being made worse due to a change in the terrain. The proposed site for the road to be built that will lead to the center has been chest high in water in past flash flooding. That means that the road running along the creek will have to be built up so high that it will essentially be a dam pushing water back on our neighborhood from the east. The proposed site of the center itself will also force water back on us from the north. I have lived on Beltrace through many flash flood events and have witnessed them firsthand. All of us would probably be forced to purchase flood insurance if this rezoning is approved. The rezoning request from agricultural to general residential is also not consistent with the area. This appears to be spot zoning, which I believe to be very suspect and unfair and should be challenged. This rezoning is to please one entity. When I purchased my home 11 years ago, I was very selective in location and the bordering area and was so pleased to be landlocked by 2 churches. That way I would kind of know what to expect in the future. And I was pleased with the zoning that was in place at that time also. My dad told me, said, you can't go wrong landlocked between 2 churches. I would therefore know what to expect in the future, I thought. Spot zoning would alter the essential character of our neighborhood. There are currently no multifamily zonings in the touching areas to ours. We've talked about trees here, trees being in full bloom or whatever. They're not in full bloom all year. We would see the center. We would hear the center. We already have traffic problems and danger entering our street when heading east and attempting left turns. The new entrance for the proposed development is just a few feet further east from our only entrance. There have been several accidents over the years involving our own residents and visitors of our residents. The proposed road will cause more traffic problems in the area. I think Mr. Marbury was affected, Ms. Crane was affected, my former neighbor that moved, Ms. Tabor, was rear-ended there. My fiance, if he hadn't taken off in a hurry, floored it the other day, he would have gotten it too. And many more. I sat at the exit to my subdivision, waiting to get out one day and saw a 3-car pileup, and I took care of a young man who was bleeding from the head. Kim is right up there on the corner. Kim works Rex like police department. We can listen to paid professionals attest that the proposed structure and road will not cause our neighborhood more water problems. However, like anything else, that's highly subjective. Only the Lord above knows when the flash flooding will come and to what extent. We know what we are dealing with now, but altering the terrain could potentially cause us serious problems. When 24 families made the decision to purchase their single-family homes bordered by 2 churches, they made an investment with the zoning in place at the time. Rezoning this property for any general residential purpose will destroy our property values. And on top of that, it will set a precedent for the church on the other side of us to attempt to do the same thing. When you make your vote on this matter, the sentiment for this particular nonprofit should not be part of the equation. We are already here, and we are adamantly opposed to any multifamily zoning, which could be apartments, trailer parks, nursing homes, daycare centers, group homes, boarding houses, and the like. It is not an exaggeration that this rezoning could ruin me financially. I'm a single person. Hadn't got too much longer to work. I and the other 23 others have an investment that we have made that could be destroyed by one group trying to move into our area. How can it be justified to financially affect 24 families for the well-being of one special interest? We are the taxpayers. I implore all of you to put yourselves in our shoes. If you invested, say, $200,000 that would become $150,000 in a flash, would you be happy with what caused it despite your pleas for help? Would you want your neighborhood done this way? No one wants to be robbed of what belongs to them. The proposed structure can sit somewhere else in this town on vacant property that is already zoned appropriately. And I will be happy to be the first to contribute to getting that alternative site. And I mean that. We would need to make sure that the sentiment for this particular nonprofit is not the only incentive to rezone. We have a petition signed by 23 of our 24 homes. You are under no obligation to rezone this property. Please vote no on the rezoning to protect the investments of 24 hardworking, tax-paying families. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking around to see who was next. Anyone?
Gentleman over
Okay, we have one more over here. Come on up.
Hello,
Good morning.
Morning.
my name is Marilyn Freeman. I live at 11 Ashton Cove in Cottonwood subdivision. We haven't experienced any flooding, but we bought our property 14 years ago specifically because it was a cove with 2 dead-end streets. And when they mentioned the possibility of opening Wheatfield Drive as a drive to get to and from the Dream Center, my first question to Gail was, are they really gonna come and go through Wheatfield? That's right in the middle of our subdivision, 22 homes. My husband is legally blind. I'm 74 years old, and my husband is 77. He knows that house and how to move around in it. We do not look forward to having to move because of congestion behind us. The parking area is on our side, right behind my house. In fact, I joked with Gail that it's close enough I can walk out of my gate of my back fence and come over and volunteer to sing at the center. I don't have anything against the Dream Center. I'm president of the women's ministry at my church. We donate clothes to the Dream Center every year as part of our clothing drive. I love the Dream Center and the work that they do. But we anticipate not the traffic from the residents in the Dream Center, but the service vehicles. As it is, when the church was built, they cut down multiple trees back of our houses. In fact, our president of our neighborhood association, Mr. Jenkins, Pastor Carter was probably remember, he went out and stood in front of bulldozers to keep them from cutting down any more trees. Because when we moved, there was all trees between us and Belle Trace, and I didn't even know about the stream, but there were trees. So you had the shading in your backyard, you had quietness, it's still quiet. We know anybody who comes into Cottonwood subdivision should be coming to one of the 22 houses there. They're not coming in there to go through to get somewhere else. So our primary concern was not having increased traffic coming through Cottonwood subdivision, which they assured us they're not gonna open Wheatfield Drive.
Right.
But now the concern is not just the residents, I know most of those people don't own cars, but the traffic for service vehicles. And that's right behind our houses. That parking area is right behind. My neighbor, who's 2 houses from me, her backyard is right at where the parking lot is gonna be. It's right up, everybody's concerned about the neighborhood in Belle Trace, but also consider Cottonwood. We are on the parking lot side, and there are fewer trees there than used to be. If they were gonna add some more trees, give us more buffer on that side. I know everybody's concerned about the flooding and everything else, but still consider the people in Cottonwood.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks. Anyone else? I think I saw,
He done Carol one.
Gail, do you want to come up? Did you? Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Gail Gustafson, the director of the Dream Center. And right now, my heart is breaking. The Dream Center does not want to harm anybody, hurt anybody, tear anybody's property down. I'm the one that asked for the investigation on the land. Because had they found that they were in a flood zone or we were going to do any danger to Belle Trace or anybody else, we would have said no thank you to the land, which is a huge thing for a nonprofit to say. But we would have done that because we want to be good neighbors, and we are good neighbors. We are considerate of everybody around. I run a very tight ship. We don't have people just coming around the Dream Center. I don't allow it. The Dream Center is about education and changing people's life and ministry to help people to become good citizens. Over 68% of our women that graduate our program are now tax-paying citizens of Jackson, Tennessee. They're doing what they were supposed to do from the very beginning. But nobody gave them the ability or the chance. The Dream Center is about giving chance. And so I'm asking you today, council, to give the Dream Center a chance to help the city of Jackson with the people that are less fortunate. We will be good neighbors. We'll keep the ditch cleaned out. We have more people that volunteer for the Dream Center to help with yard work and things that need to be done than anywhere else. I promise you, your gardener will not do the job that ours will, because ours are volunteer, and they're doing it out of love, and they're doing it because they want to help. I don't believe that this is an issue of flooding, because all of the investigation has been done. I believe it is about who you want in your backyard. And I believe that's discrimination. And I believe if we start discriminating of who we have in our neighborhoods, then we are going back to the 1960s. And I don't think that's fair. So I'm asking the council today to vote yes, because the Dream Center is doing the community a service. We're the people in the future that are going to be helping. We are changing generations. We're not changing people for just today. We are changing these children's lives. So when they grow up, they're going to love the city of Jackson just like I do, just like Miss Stephanie does. And I thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
My name is Stephanie LaFoon. I live at 66 Northwick Drive.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all for listening to us. I want you to know that from the bottom of our heart, especially, I know I'm not talking to the microphone, I will take responsibility to be the best neighbor that you have ever had. I want to stand up because I'm an example of the kind of people that are helped at the Dream Center.
Okay.
My past was drugs. My past was alcohol. My past was promiscuity. My past was anything against the church, because I hated those hypocrites and all those people that claimed to be churchy. I hated them with a passion. And if I did something, I did it 110%. I thought I was pregnant at 17 by a local drug dealer in Tupelo, Mississippi. And I did not want to embarrass my family. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that that's who I was back then. It is shameful for me to stand in front of you. I might as well be naked to stand in front of you and share that portion of my past. It was awful, and I was an awful individual. I was going home to get my dad's handgun and to take my own life, to spare that child from having the daddy that I had picked. But on the way home, have you ever heard the phrase, but God? But God spoke to me. And it's hard when the only thing that God has ever said to you out loud is, I'm very angry with you. Go home and read your Bible. I was instantly sober for the first time in I don't know how many months. I went home and read my Bible, and I will just tell you that it's too long of a story to keep y'all sitting here today. But I got clean by the blood of Jesus Christ. Now I'll tell you, the Dream Center is all about the blood of Jesus Christ. And it is, because there's nothing that can change a person from the inside out but the blood. Now, I know we're not in church. I hope I'm not getting in trouble for going on record to tell people. But the blood of Jesus Christ is the only thing that can take a worn out, tore down, drug doing, stealing, awful, drunk, not caring about society or anything else enough to go home and just kill herself and turn her into a woman that went to Union University. I got my degree. Had it not been for an awesome girl named Rachel Wright, I would have come in number one. They do not have a second place. They only have a number one. I'm telling you, that's still tough to this day. Congratulations, Rachel. You deserved it, girl. So let me tell you, the second thing I want to do is I want to go to law school. And I plan to be the best advocate. I plan to get up in front of distinguished individuals like you and tell the world that my client was wrong and that somebody else's was right. And what I found is that I no longer had the blood for that. What I began to do is find in each of those women that came through the God-given gifts and abilities that they had. And say, you know what, I know you've used your hands to steal. I've seen you on Walmart's Most Wanted. But let me tell you, let me sit down and show you on this sewing machine that was donated by Gary's neighbor. And I'll teach you how to sew something. I'll teach you how to sew crosses. I'll teach you how to paint, and I'm not a painter. And on the back of it, we'll write scripture that says, trust in the Lord. That's what we're about doing. And I know that it's not fun to have your dirt work turned up. Mine is being turned up. I live right behind Grace United Methodist / Sacred Heart. And they've built a huge retaining wall, and they've done lots of things over there. But what happened is we just kind of crossed that line and walked over and talked to them. And the guy said, are y'all real upset with us? And my husband said, no, I'm just worried that I'm not going to be able to keep my kids off your awesome playground out here. You got a great looking soccer field. And he said, well, y'all come over anytime. And so I just stand here to tell y'all, I hope it gets built. I hope you vote in our favor. I'm praying. I'm asking. I'm asking that if you meant to push the no button, that your hand pushes the yes button. Because I believe God is going to do something in our city. You know what else he told me? When I was 17 years old, about 3 weeks away, he told me that revival would start in your city, Jackson, Tennessee. Revival. And he told me that it would not just spread to our city, it would spread to our nation and to our world. Now that's who I am. I'm just a representative of a no-good, drug-using, alcoholic girl who you like to sleep around. But with God, and but God, right? I stand before you today and say, I'll be your neighbor. I will be your neighbor. I do have a home that I live in, but you can ask my husband, he's sitting back there. If I could live at the Dream Center and we owned property right there, I would. Because I believe in it, y'all. It is worth doing. There are 100,000, whatever citizens, Mayor, you could tell us better than me, that want this city to be changed because they see the problems with drugs and alcohol and people stealing. And they see the problems, and no one wants to be the one that says, yes, I'll help them. But I'm here to tell you, Gail Gustafson is the woman who has said the yes. I'm saying the yes. And I believe that although I'm so concerned and respectful of those other homeowners, the 24 homeowners, I want y'all to know I'm for you and with you, and we share the same problem as soon as we move in, because I also don't want that place to flood. Are you kidding me? I'm the capital campaign manager. People are giving me $3 million to build this monument to God, to say we will honor you, where people here will be saved and be healed and miraculously go from being a guy named Saul to being a woman named something else, right? Getting a new name as a new person and a new creature. And so today, that is my ask for your yes. I need your yes. I need you to believe in me. I will put myself on the line. I need you to believe in me that we will do everything so that that land is drained in a different way. And really, we're doing the same thing and using the same people. Terry Drumright can tell me different, but I am a lawyer too. In my mind, I think we're just doing the same thing y'all asked to do. In some of those back houses that were at the end of the cove, you know, they had the flood fringe thing too. And I think they elevated so that they're not. And we don't want any harm on y'all, because chances are if it's going to flood y'all, it's going to flood us. And so we are standing together. I'm asking this community to come together, and I'm asking for your vote today to be yes. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks. Anyone else that would like to address it? Okay, one more. One over here. Come in.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Christy Anderson. I had no intention of getting up here because I'm not a speaker in front of people. I've been on the Dream Center board since 2010. And it was going through Leadership Jackson that caused me to want to take ownership of my community. The Dream Center makes a difference in this community, and I know there's a fear of the unknown of what's going on there and the type of people that are there. I can testify that Gail is very strict in who she allows to stay at the Dream Center. If these women do not make the decision to make a life change, they're gone. Gail works on their heart. She teaches them about God. She teaches them about finance, about being a good parent, about becoming a contributing member of this society and giving back, and to become a hard worker. That's the people that we're trying to nurture at the Dream Center. We want to change their past and make the legacy that they leave better for every citizen in this community. That's all I have to say. I just want to know you to know that the type of people that will be there are people who have made the decision to make a life change. So don't be afraid of who is your neighbor, because they have standards they have to meet to be there. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure that everyone here that wishes to speak has an opportunity to do so. You have some comments that you have not heard yet. I would encourage you just to go ahead and hold your hand up. We'll continue this. So I think, Steve, we have a total eclipse today. We don't want to miss that. Total eclipse of the sun. I think it's today. No, I'm just kidding. We'll stay right here through the total eclipse if we need to. I want to make sure you all have an opportunity to speak.
Mayor, if I could, just say a couple things.
Okay, go ahead.
Go
Yeah,
ahead,
go
Mom.
ahead.
You in charge.
We got one back in the back, and then if everyone is okay with that, we will bring the public hearing to a close. And I think Councilman Dodd has the floor after this.
Mayor, while Reverend Carter's coming forward, there was a young lady who had some pictures on her phone, I believe that she wanted us to have. If you could email that to possibly Ms. Brooks, and then she could distribute that to the council. You just shoot them then. I think I've gotten us a couple of things from you.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me come one more time. And I just want you all to know I'm praying for you. You're earning your money today. And so I know it's a tough decision. You know, we try, I think all of us want to avoid questioning motives and questioning the thoughts behind the comments and things, but it was suggested that the church would not give this away if it wasn't of any value. We see that as the opposite motive. We see, like David, you know, we can't give anything that wouldn't cost us something. And on our master plan that David had asked about, we had every inch of the ground covered. But we felt like this, over the years, vision evolves. And we felt like this is part of our vision. James 1:22 says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. And we feel like that is part of our vision, and we understand all the concerns. I know the neighbors in Cottonwood, the 22, we talk about the 24 in Beltrace, there's 46 neighbors that are gonna be directly affected by this. You know, they were upset when we cleared the land. I remember getting letters, and but I think we've been good neighbors. I think we've tried to improve the neighborhood, and we've worked with them, and I think we'll continue to do that. And there's all kinds of things. There's, you know, I pray that God would give you as a mayor and as the city council the wisdom to do what's right. Obviously, what I think would be right would be different than what the others think would be right. But I want to help people. And I think we've done as much as we possibly can to minimize the impact to both neighborhoods. And I just encourage you to vote yes on this matter.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Carter. I think at this point, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I appreciate each of you sharing your thoughts, sharing your hearts with this council. And with the public hearing closed, we have a motion and a second for approval of the ordinance on first reading.
May I say something,
Yes,
please?
yes.
You know, I appreciate everyone that's come up and spoke this morning. Everybody has feelings, both sides. As I said, told Reverend Carter a while ago, we are trying to benefit what we believe and what we care about. Well, this is the United States of America, and we are representative of this city, and we took an oath that we would represent the people of this city, and we would honor the Constitution, and that is protect the people. So what I feel like that we need to do is we need to honor the people's choice, and we have a group of people here that are fighting for their rights of their property, and I understand it completely. So I'm going to ask the council to vote no. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Councilman Dodd, do you have a comment?
Yes, when I first came this morning, I understand both sides. It was kind of a hard decision to make because I understand, you know, when people make an investment in their homes, but of course, then would it affect the home stand as far as value with the Dream Center going there?
Well, I'm not a real estate agent, and I'm not a real estate appraiser, but I have had experience with real estate and appraisals over time. And I will say that appraisals are subjective. They're someone's best guess based on a particular situation. And it's hard to say impact when you're looking at land uses that are not similar. Because if you look at a real estate appraisal, most of the time what they do is they look at what is called comparable sales. And they look at what this house sold for in this situation, what this house sold for if you were trying to value a home. They don't really look at, you know, other uses that are different. They don't go, what is the value of Northside Assembly versus the value of a home. They look at comparable sales. So, I mean, when I look at land use, and again, that was one of the comments, and I was just going to point out to you, you know, it was made mention about something in the staff report running counter to what it was, but again, what we were saying in the staff report was that there was an extension of an existing RG2 zone, which it is, and this is an RG2 zone. This area here, in the brown that you see RG2 in the same area, it is Creekside Apartments, so it does exist in the area, and it is multifamily. So there are multifamily uses present. But again, somebody looking at Beltrace, a home in Beltrace, valuing it, would not look at Creekside Apartments and go, okay, what is its value and what's its impact on these houses? So in my opinion, in dealing with appraisals in the past, I don't see how one could have an effect on the other.
All right, thank you, but I just...
Okay, any other discussion from council?
I just want to say that when I came here today, I realize the only way you can vote on this is to not think of the Dream Center. You have to get that out of your head, because the Dream Center is wonderful. I mean, it's a great asset to the community, but you have to look at it, it's a building that we're talking about, not the center, but a building. And I listened to the people, and I don't know if I would want this in my community. The Dream Center is a different matter, but the multifamily deal is what seems to bother the citizens. So what I've tried to do as I've listened is, of course, the people who want the Dream Center there are people from the Dream Center, people who love the Dream Center, who have a connection. The people who live in the area don't want it. That's pretty obvious. But I've tried to weigh, is the asset of having a lovely place for the Dream Center going to drastically impact the 24 families? And I'm not convinced that it's going to be irreparable damage. In fact, I'm thinking that someday, if we vote no on this, someday something will go up there. A structure will of some kind. The church will do something with it. And I'm not so sure the Dream Center are not the better neighbors.
Okay, any other council member have we're in discussion mode here. Any other council? If not, we have a motion and a second. Council, please vote.
And the motion passes 5-3.
Okay, motion is approved on first reading. The chair declares a 15-minute recess.
That was tough one.
Yes.
See this? See this?
I got a cousin out there, man. She talking.